the depth of Christ's love for us we experience as we meditate on the stations of the cross. He did it for us because we didn't even know ourselves, we didn't understand. And even now, with all of our religious education, receiving the sacraments regularly, why are there still those times when we don't do what God wants us to do, or when we fail? It can be failure in charity, it can be a failure in patience, it can be a failure to forgive, it can be a failure to love someone. It can be failing to love someone by judging them. We do those things, and the Lord sees that even now we still don't totally understand, do we? In my own experience as a priest, there's been so many times when I've experienced the presence of Christ at the most critical times in people's lives. Well, just like yesterday afternoon, I was called to the Cleveland Clinic on Learnagle Road that a longtime friend of mine was dying. And I hadn't seen her in a few years. But I went there and she was in a coma, but I know she could hear me just by the movements that she made. And I knew her well enough that I knew that she wanted Christ. She knew what was happening. And it was such an interior realization of Christ's presence to be with someone who's about to pass from this life to the next. And as I gave her absolution, anointed her with the holy oil, gave her the apostolic blessing, and just told her to be at peace. She's in God's hands. And she moved again once more, struggling to open an eye, almost happened. But I knew that God was there. And I thought, this is why Jesus died on the cross, so that he could be there for her, for Carol. He could be there for her. And he could be there for you and for me. Jesus would have died on the cross if we were the only ones here. And I can remember times in my own experience where I was able to see Christ in somebody, but they weren't able to see it themselves. I may have shared the story before about a young boy, about 16 years old. Maybe he was only 14, I can't remember exactly because it's many years ago when I was a very young priest. But he was a real juvenile delinquent, skipping school, stealing cigarettes, drinking alcohol, just getting into one bit of trouble after another. And I kept trying to help him. In so many ways, I thought he was converting. I had a whole group of young boys that were like that. And I gathered them around the parish and asked them to do some work for me. And then I told them that they could, they wanted to build some kind of little motorbikes or something. And I didn't think they could do it. But I was letting them wash my car, and they were cleaning up the grounds, and they were doing all this, and I kept giving them money. And then I didn't know what happened about the go-karts they wanted to build, but till one night, the police came to the door with these 5 boys and said they have an appointment with you. It was 11 o'clock at night. They looked at me like, Father, please say you do. So I said, oh yes, I'm expecting them. He said, well, they have these motorbikes. We don't know where they got them, but they're riding up and down the street with them, and they're not allowed to do that. We could confiscate the bikes and they could go to juvenile home for it. And so I said, well, let them in. So we talked. And here I found out that one of their dads said they could use his garage. And they actually built these things. So then I talked to the pastor and I said, can I give them a schedule? We had a huge parking lot. And I said, can I give them a schedule where they can just ride those bikes all over the place on our property? So he agreed, and we did it, and it was great. But one of those boys I started to tell you about was just one that was really in trouble all the time. And finally, he was arrested and taken to the juvenile detention center when it was on 22nd and Central. And I went down there, and because I found out that he tried to escape. And he even pretended that he had a gun because he wanted them to shoot him. I mean, he was in really bad shape. And when I went in there, he just said to me, Father, why do you care? Just go away. Why do you care about me? And I said, because you don't care about yourself. Somebody has to care about you. And I said, because I see Christ in you. How can you do that? I said, Jesus died on the cross for you. He loves you. He wants you to turn around. He wants you to forget these bad things you're doing, and he wants you to turn your life around. And I'm not going to give up. I'm not giving up. And he just stared at me and he said, I'm impossible. I'm hopeless. I said, no, you're not. With the help of God, everything is possible. And I remember seeing this young boy and thinking, he just has to understand that Christ is within him. And finally, with the help from some wonderful judges at the time, I was able to find a youth rehabilitation center in Pennsylvania where we took him. And he was there for about 1.5 years. And it just did him a whole world of good. He was like a different young man. And he came out of there and hugged me, thanked me, and he went into business with his father, who was an auto body finisher, car finisher. And he went into business with his dad. He was a changed person. And I thought, I don't know why I thought of him during Stations Tonight, but that's why Jesus died on the cross. Because like this boy, he didn't even know that he needed redemption. He knew he did. He had no idea how to get it, and he needed to know Christ better. We're here in the church tonight because we want to know Jesus better. And we do, hopefully, as we meditate upon what he did for us. His patience. When I look at myself and shake my head and say, when I'm getting ready to go to confession, am I ever going to get it right? Am I ever going to come and say I really don't have any sins? I hope that day comes. But I know that there's a merciful and loving God who probably looks at me sometimes, just like I looked at this boy, his name was Danny, who looked and say, are you ever going to get it? I think, that we're human and we fail. We fail because we're human. Our emotions, our fatigue, our depressions, all the things that happen to us in life are causal factors in failing in love and sinning. But there's always hope because the Lord is always there beckoning us back, always there to give us hope and to heal us. And so that's about our crucified Lord. I love you, Lord, with my whole heart. Never let me offend you again. Those words should echo in our minds as we go through Lent, and that the Lord can look at us. In spite of our failings, he looks at us with the depth of the love of his own sacred heart. And that always gives me hope, and I hope it gives you hope as well.